I'm really pleased to have all of you with us tonight, and I'm very excited about all of our guests and about the music and the food that has been brought to us tonight. So I want to start by bringing up, we're very, very lucky to have the only all-female Latin band in Boston to perform for a few minutes with us. Please help me welcome up Threnody to the stage with Zyra Pola. Let's hear it. Let's go.
Hello, everyone. Hola. All right, I need your help. All right. With your mouth, you're gonna do something easy. This shaker, okay? So as soon as you hear the bass, whenever you want, mama. Okay. Can you do that with me? That's right. Bésame mucho, como si fuera esta noche la última vez. Bésame, bésame mucho, que tengo miedo a perderte después. Bésame, bésame mucho, como si fuera esta noche la última vez. Bésame, bésame mucho, que tengo miedo a perderte después. Quiero tenerte muy cerca, mirarte a tus ojos, verme junto a mí. Piensa que tal vez mañana yo voy a estar lejos, muy lejos de aquí. Bésame mucho, como si fuera esta noche la última vez. Bésame, bésame mucho, que tengo miedo a perderte después. Que tengo miedo a perderte después. Que tengo miedo a perderte después. Bésame, papito, sin prisa y con calma. Besa, besa, besa con toda la gana. Quiero amanecer contigo toda la mañana, así que besa, besa, bésame. Recórreme mi cuerpo una y otra vez. Dame tus caricias, hazme enloquecer. Yo quiero estar contigo hasta el amanecer, así que besa, besa, bésame. Besa, 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 bésame. Bésame mucho. Recórreme mi cuerpo una y otra vez. Bésame mucho. Pero que besa, 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 bésame. Bésame mucho. Esos besitos de coco, besitos de Coco Chanel. Bésame mucho. Pero que besa, bésame. Bésame mucho. Ay, qué rico cuando me besas Let me hear the shakers. Kitch. 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 Bésame. Eso, gracias. Thank you so much. My name is Zaira Pola. I come from Puerto Rico. And I'm playing congas, no bongos, congas, cowbell, and I'm singing on my right, all the way down from Cuba. Ciego de Ávila?
Yes.
We have Iris on bass. Please give it up for her. Also from Cuba, Manzanillo. We have on keyboards and vocals, Saili. Please give it up for her. And we are Trinity. Yes, we are the first all-female band, Latin band in Boston. We all met in Berkeley. I graduated 2013. You graduated 2017. Awesome. And she just got there in Berkeley, but we had the pleasure to play with her and with her, I think 3 years ago, 4. And the reason of this group original was because in my own experience, to be in music industry as a woman is even harder. Demands you have to be super strong, and it's funny when I heard this phrase that the powerful sex gender is demands, and I don't agree with that. I think women, I think we are the same, you know, but I think in some stuff we can even be more stronger, and this is only a proof that we can do everything. And yeah, that's why we are here. So we are super honored to be here this afternoon. I would like to thank all the staff, Kriya, Amy, Alex, all the people that work. Then, you know, thanks to them, we are here. So we're gonna be performing just one more song, unfortunately. We have to say goodbye super early, but I hope you guys are having fun and enjoying our music. Please like us on Facebook, Instagram with the name Trinity, number 3, NITY music. So please find us and let's sing. Te pregunto que cómo, cuándo y dónde, tú siempre me respondes, quizás, quizás, quizás. Y así pasan los días y yo desesperando y tú contestando, quizás, quizás, quizás. Estás perdiendo el tiempo pensando, pensando por lo que más tú quieras. ¿Hasta cuándo? ¿Hasta cuándo? Si pasan los días y yo desesperando y tú contestando, quizás, quizás, quizás. Díselos ahí. quizás, 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 quizás. ¡Qué rico! Quizás, quédate conmigo. Quizás, quizás, ven, quédate. Quizás, quédate conmigo. Quizás, yo te llevo pa' Puerto Rico. Quizás, quédate conmigo. Y si te gusta Cuba, yo te llevo pa' Manzanillo. Quizás, quédate conmigo. Ay, pero rica, mira que la deja abrazadito. Quizás, 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 ven, quédate. Aunque no tenga dinero, no tenga la casa, quédate, quédate. Ven, mira, papito, ven. No tenga dinero, no tenga la casa. Aunque no tenga mucho dinerito en el bolsillo. No tenga dinero, no tenga la casa. Ay, qué rico, mira, cámara. Dios es el testigo, mira si mamá. No tenga la casa. Quédate, quédate, quédate conmigo. Ay, qué rico, mira, con esta yo me despido. Quédate. Gracias, thank you so much.
More, you guys, for Trinity. Oh my goodness. Thank you for being with us. Thank you so much. So I'm going to do a little bit of, I guess, get some of the stuff out of the way that we need to say. Housekeeping, that's the word. So we're going to be taking questions in kind of a non-traditional way today. We will be doing a sort of raise your hand Q&A, but if you would like to, we're going to try this new thing out that's called Slido. So if you want to take your cell phones out, and you can go to slido.com, and there's a code, OX for Oxfam, and then today's date, 3/12, OX 3/12. And that way you can kind of be submitting questions while the conversation's happening up here. We can kind of take a look at them, and that way we won't miss anyone's thoughts if you have some burning question while we're in the middle of it. So it's slido.com, SLIDO, and then the code is OX312. So again, welcome to WBUR's City Space. We are thrilled to have you all here. I'm Shannon Dooling. Tonight we're sort of extending International Women's Day because one day is definitely not enough. So we're extending it into this week, And we're gathering tonight to celebrate strength and resilience, especially among women from Central American countries. It's a region that I've been grateful enough to travel to cover immigration news as part of WBUR's coverage. And tonight we're going to recognize the challenges facing women in Central American countries, but we're also going to recognize the resiliency and basically kind of discuss some of the decisions that are being made in these regions right now. We are here because of Oxfam. Oxfam America and Centro Presente are helping us kick this off tonight. So I want to thank both of them for sponsoring this evening. But we're going to begin by really bringing on to the stage our panelists. I'm actually, you know what, I'm going to ask you guys to just come on up one by one, and then I'll introduce you once you're seated. So Patricia, you want to come on up? And Rebecca, you can clap. Yeah, let's welcome them up to the stage. And once we're seated, I'll introduce you guys. So Patricia, Rebecca, and Fatima, and Anna. We can have Anna maybe sit right next to Rebecca, I think, or behind Rebecca. Okay, there we go. We're still getting the lay of the land in this place, so. But isn't it beautiful? It's really, really nice. We're really, really blessed to have this place and to have this venue for conversation, right, for public conversation. Okay, so I'm going to start by introducing you to Patricia Montes. She is the director of Centro Presente. She was also my travel buddy to Honduras in August and held my hand when we flew into Tegucigalpa, which just Google Tegucigalpa Airport and you'll know what I mean.
Dangerous airport.
It's very dangerous. But I mean, more importantly, Patricia's work is renowned here in Boston, in New England, across the country, and in Central America. She is the leader of one of the longest standing immigrant-led immigrant rights organizations in Massachusetts. She's been recognized as an immigrants' rights leader, a human rights leader, and a tireless advocate for just economic and social policies, including a just U.S. immigration policy. So let's welcome Patricia. And Rebecca Alfaro. Rebecca is from El Salvador originally. She immigrated to the U.S. more than 8 years ago after her mother and husband were murdered by gangs in El Salvador. She's been an active member of Centro Presente. She's shared her story with Univision and Telemundo, and she recently had a very moving experience in Washington, D.C., sharing her story. We're joined to Rebecca's right by Ana Laura Perez Ibave, who's a translator and is going to be helping to facilitate the conversation with Rebecca this evening. So let's please welcome Rebecca and Ana. And we have Fatima Sumar. We are so lucky to have Fatima. She's the Vice President of Global Programs for Oxfam America, which, by the way, is based here in Boston. I'm not sure if you all know that, but Oxfam, of course, is an international anti-poverty organization. Fatima oversees Oxfam's regional development and humanitarian response programs, including those in Central America, where Oxfam has worked for over 30 years, and I know that Fatima just recently visited, so we'll be able to tap into a lot of her knowledge in that regard. So let's get the conversation started. So Patricia, we're going to start with you. We've heard a lot in the news and on Twitter about what's being called a crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border, at the southern border. President Trump has referred to it as an immigration crisis, a crisis of illegal immigration. A lot of aid organizations have referred to it as a humanitarian crisis. I want to hear from you about what you would consider crises that are happening beyond the border. What's happening in the region of Central America, Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador?
Well, first of all, I really want to thank Oxfam America and WBUR for organizing this space to talk about a crisis that have been invisible. Mm-hmm. we've seen the conversation about immigrants and immigration in the U.S. People have been saying that, we're facing a crisis at the U.S. border with all these Central Americans that are coming. The president is saying that they are invading the U.S., right? But for us, what is happening right now is not news. Our members have been coming to Centro Presente for decades from Central America. And in the past decade, we have been receiving, especially female and children here in Boston that are coming from Central America. And I'm glad that the name, actually, title of the event is Beyond the Border, because the crisis is beyond the border. And it's actually a crisis that is happening right now in Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. It's not a coincidence that most of the migrants that are right now at the US and Mexican border are coming from Central America, when the UN is telling us, for years have been telling us before Trump, that the most dangerous places in the earth after Syria are Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador.
So help us understand what those conditions are. What are people facing on the ground? So 10 years ago, are you hearing different stories from people who are coming to Centro Presente now than 10 years ago, or has it been the same common themes in terms of what's driving people to leave?
I will say the same and worse, right? And I want to start, we're talking about countries that were facing civil conflicts during the 80s, right? 75,000 people died during the civil conflict in El Salvador. They were just countries that were trying to recuperate themselves. And I think that sometimes we don't pay attention to that. And the endemic level of corruption and impunity that is taking place in these three countries is extreme. And we always hear stories in the news that are, in our opinion, in my personal opinion as an activist, as an immigrant from Honduras, very superficial. Because we sometimes cry. But are stories that are not necessarily telling us what are the real factors that are behind forced migration from Central America. And of course, it's violence and it's extreme poverty. Honduras, for example, more than 60% of the population, that is more than half of the population of the Hondurans, are living in extreme poverty. And I always ask the audience, do you know what it means to live in a country in extreme poverty? Somebody that is not from Oakland or WR. Is when you live on less than $1 a day. That's according to the UN. So I think that, but we also have to pay attention about the policies that the US have been implementing historically in Central America, because obviously the policies that the US have been implementing in Central America are not necessarily working for ordinary people. When you have 60% of the population that are living in extreme poverty, that tells you something. The USAID have been operating in Central America since 1961. So that, for us, I think we should ask this question: are the policies that the US have been implementing in Central America working to reduce extreme poverty, to reduce violence in Central America? I don't think so.
Yeah. I want to, Fatima, I want to ask you, you were recently in Central America to sort of oversee some of the programs that Oxfam has down there. When were you there, and how does the sort of big picture historical context that Patricia is offering square with what you saw on the ground there?
So first, Shannon, thanks so much for having us here. And I just want to congratulate all of you at WBUR for this incredible space. And I understand we're one of the first programs that you guys are airing here. So thank you for having it, and to honor International Women's Day, and to talk about the resilience and strength of Central American women in particular. And thank you to Centro Presente as well for working with Oxfam America on this. I was actually down there in October, and I touched down in Tegucigalpa just as the first caravans were forming in San Pedro Sula in the north. And I think when we step back a little bit, and to marry your question, when we step back, what you're seeing, what's new in the news is this public exodus of thousands of people forming at the same time, seeking safety in numbers to try to make the very dangerous journey north to the US southern border. But people have been trying to migrate for many, many years. That's not new. What's new is the public exodus together, where people are saying, maybe this time if I try to escape, whether it's poverty, whether it's gang violence, whether it's frankly a political capture of the state by an elite that no longer serves its population and the majority of its population, if I leave together, maybe there's safety in numbers. And so you see that those were the first caravans that formed in October in Honduras, but also forming in Nicaragua, in El Salvador, in Guatemala, and marching north towards the Guatemalan border and into Mexico. But what you're seeing is really 30 years of failed policies from Central American governments, but also from supporters like in the United States here. And their failed economic policies, as Patricia is saying, their failed political policies that prop up regimes that frankly have the economic interest of the elite over those of everyday citizens, right? And so when you have countries after 20 and 30 years past the Civil War, I mean, in Honduras today, it's almost now 80% of the people living in different versions of poverty, right? You have a situation of drought that has taken place throughout Central America. In the Corredor Seco, the dry corridor area in 2015, because of climate change, these conditions, the water's not coming back and the rainfall's not coming back in the same patterns. So farmers are forced to flee their farms. They're no longer able to grow the same agricultural crops. We know gang violence has been certainly, if not on the rise, at sustained high levels in these areas. You have job creation that only favors a few factories in certain areas at the expense of everybody else. And so what you're seeing here is a confluence of failed economic and political policies by leaders in these countries that no longer serve the interests of their people. And people saying, basta, enough. And that's what you're seeing coming out. And while it's not historic in the numbers or in the man-made crisis that you see appearing in the news, it is historic in marking a turning point of people publicly coming together to say enough is enough.
So we're going to come back to, I was jotting down some things. I want to come back to a couple of those sentiments you just shared. But first, I want to invite Rebecca into the conversation. I'm wondering if we can start by having you share a little bit with us about your decision to leave El Salvador. What the factors were, why you felt like it was necessary for you to leave El Salvador when you did.
Si nos pudieras decir o compartir qué te llevó a tomar la decisión para venirte aquí a los Estados Unidos, cuáles fueron los factores que te llevaron a preguntarte, ¿es esto necesario realmente?
Pues me vine porque estaba siendo más que todo obligada por las pandillas que me estaban amenazando de muerte. Y pues la vida en El Salvador para mí no estaba siendo nada dura, ya que habían matado a mi esposo y a mi mamá. Entonces, por eso tomé la decisión de venirme para acá sin importarme los riesgos que yo corría al venirme para este país. No fue nada fácil porque estaba dejando, ya había muerto parte de mi vida y estaba dejando parte de mi vida también allá dejando a mis hijas, pero pensé que era lo mejor que yo podía hacer si no quería morir y dejar a mis hijas sin papá y sin mamá de una sola vez.
Well, I came here obligated for the gangs and all the threats. I had a really difficult time there. They killed my husband, they killed my mom, and I made the decision of coming here without caring about the risks. And it wasn't really easy for me. It was very hard for me. A part of me kind of died, and I had to leave my daughter behind and a part of my life also there.
Yeah. So that was 8 years ago.
Yes.
And we're still hearing stories like yours, similar to yours, every day. But you're the only one in this room, I'm venturing, who's lived that. I wonder if you can help us understand what the journey was like and talk a little bit about those risks we hear that it's a dangerous journey, but talk about those risks, because I want people to understand the calculation that you had to make.
Aun cuando tú te viniste hace 8 años, hemos estado escuchando historias similares, pero de alguna forma tu historia nos ha conmovido mucho y quisiera que nos ayudaras a entender el viaje, todo ese viaje que tú tomaste desde El Salvador para acá, y que nos explicaras también los riesgos. ¿Cuáles fueron específicamente los riesgos que tú tomaste en este viaje?
Bueno, pues creo que los riesgos fueron el todo o nada, porque arriesgué mi vida. O sea, yo venía sola, no tenía dinero para pagar ningún coyote. No tenía ni un dólar, si se puede decir, y venía pues nada más confiando en que podía hacerlo, que trataría de sobrevivir en el camino, porque tenía 2 niñas por quien luchar y huyendo de todas las pandillas que me estaban persiguiendo en mi país. Cada día pues era muy difícil porque tuve que batallar con la comida, no me gustaba la comida. Luego no sabía cómo caminar y pues el único camino que era tomar la bestia, tomar el tren. No sabía cómo lo haría, pero pues me enseñaron a tirarme el tren y así logré llegar hasta la frontera de Estados Unidos.
Well, it was a matter of all or anything. I had to risk my life. I was by myself. I didn't have money. I didn't have a dollar to pay for the smuggler. But I had the trust that I could do this, or the confidence. I had 2 kids, and I had to run away from the gangs, and every day was really hard for me. I didn't like the food that I was eating during my journey. I didn't like to walk either, but that was the only way. And also, I had to take the train called La Bestia, which I had to be taught how to get off from the train because I didn't even know how to do that.
Thank you for sharing that. So I'm going to ask this of everyone. You mentioned a confluence of factors, Fatima. I wonder if it feels like, to all of you, I'm curious, if it feels like things are bubbling over finally, or has it been, it feels like you're at this point where things are as bad as they can possibly get in terms of the situation on the ground in some of the countries we're talking about? Or has this sense of urgency always been there, but we're just, as we've talked about, we're just seeing it more in our coverage and in our political sphere? I wonder if this feels like a different time, if this feels like a different opportunity.
For me, it's a combination. I think that the urgency was there before. Rebecca came to Centro Presente in 2015, right? And I don't think that we were talking. I mean, in 2014, the media was covering, the crisis of the unaccompanied minors. The crisis of the unaccompanied minors was invisible too before. And we were receiving unaccompanied minors, and not just Centro Presente. If you ask many other organizations that have been also working with Central Americans, have been facing the same reality, receiving migrants. If you go to Mexico, the reality of Central Americans have been invisible there too. And but I think that, as I said, for me and for Centro Presente, it's a combination. But the other thing is that the situation is really worse. The UN have been telling us that there are more people dying now in Central America than during the civil conflict. That's horrible. When you know that people are dying because it's a civil conflict there, we don't have a civil conflict there, but people are dying more, than. And the other thing that is very important that we have to acknowledge is that in the cases of Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador, corruption, impunity, poverty, and violence is common. But each country have differences, I think, right? I don't know, Fatima, what you think about it, but I think that in the case of El Salvador, most of the violence is coming from the gangs.
Right.
but also from the police because the system is very corrupt.
Targeted violence.
Exactly. And in the case of Honduras, most of the violence is coming from our own government that is killing people. And I will give you more information about that because it's connected with U.S. foreign policy and all these projects that are going to Honduras right now that are displacing indigenous people, women, campesinos, peasants, and they are killing them. And I think a good example of that political repression is the political assassination of Berta Cáceres, who is, this very well-known indigenous who was fighting against an hydroelectrical company that is from the U.S., right? And that had also money from rich people in Honduras. And it's not just Berta Cáceres. I'm from Honduras and I really care about what happened with Berta Cáceres. But there are more people dying, activists, indigenous that we don't know their names. 2 weeks ago, 2 indigenous people from Honduras were killed. Because they were fighting against this hydroelectrical company. And 12 of them were in detention. They were detained because they were fighting against this company. And I think it's very complex, but we also have to realize sometimes we don't want to talk about U.S. foreign policy. But if we don't change U.S. foreign policy to Central America, more people are going to come.
I mean, Fatima, did you want to add anything on that note?
So let me try to separate this into 2 different buckets for the audience, right? So first is there's been so much coverage in the last few months by what I would say is a political man-made crisis by the Trump administration on the border. But when you step back and look at the numbers, right? Last year we arrested 400,000 people on the southwest border, right? In 2000, under President Clinton, it was 1.64 million, right? So when we hear all this in the news and our headlines around a crisis at the border, people are flooding in record numbers. It's historically true for the last few years, in fact. Ironically, for all of the aggressive policies we have on the southwest border, they're not working. People are still coming because they have no choice.
Right.
They have to flee to survive. And for anyone that's been to any of these, to this region, the conditions on which people have to flee, right? The fact that, something close to 60 to 75% of women who are fleeing are likely to be raped or be sold into sexual trafficking, right? And they know that. And that's still better than dying back home.
Yes.
So this is not they're fleeing violence. They're not the cause of violence. So this is a man-made political crisis that we have made here in the United States, right? In terms of what we see in terms of the numbers and our headlines and the stories. So, but if we step back historically, we're seeing lower numbers than we've seen coming in the past. Now, in terms of what's happening in these countries, is it at a bubbling point? Well, this is what I would say. When I was down there, I was struck by the fact that in places, and I want to talk about Honduras and Guatemala in particular, because I'm really struck, and I met with Berta Cáceres' mother, actually, when we were there. You have situations like in Honduras for a moment, where Honduras is the size of New Jersey, just to put this in context. This is not that big of a state. It's pretty small. In Honduras, every 19 hours, a woman is murdered, right? So every day, a woman is murdered in Honduras. 95% of those cases, 95%, so almost 100% of the time, they will never get punished by the state, right? So whether that's local police, whether that's the courts, those cases will not be punished. So you have a situation where women in particular are facing the brunt of political violence, right? Whether that's from gangs, whether that's from, at the end of the day, it's state-sanctioned violence with almost close to 100% impunity, right? So, when we met with people like Berta Cáceres' mother and others, what they're saying is to resist is to die, right? You have to flee in some of these situations, and that's what you're seeing. So that's the crisis point. In March 2017, right outside the capital in Guatemala, there was a shelter, a state shelter for young girls. 56 girls were living there. And they had been protesting that they were being sexually abused by state authorities that were taking care of them. And this is a state-run shelter for these girls, right? So they were protesting this. March 2017, March 8th, there's mysteriously a fire in the shelter, right? 41 girls are deliberately trapped inside and burned to death as wards of the state in Guatemala, right? The case is still not resolved, right? So to me, the bubbling point question is, the bubbling point for who?
Yeah.
For who? This may or may not be a crisis for the United States government. It may or may not be a crisis for governments in the region. But I would argue that this is a very real crisis for the people of this region who have survived civil wars and conflicts. And this is worse.
Right.
And this is worse. So I think that's what you're seeing. And you know, the lens we apply at Oxfam is poverty is man-made. Poverty is a set of choices we make as citizens, as countries, on what kind of systems we want and who gets access to those systems, right? It's a violation, it's a rights-based approach because we deliberately decide who has access and who has human rights and who doesn't. And what you're seeing playing out in this region is exactly that.
And
It's choices around rights, around who has the right to live, who has the right to thrive, who has the right to not be hungry, who has the right to be safe.
And it seems that is being woven into the political landscape here, right? But the messaging is diffused by the time it reaches the border.
Just want to add to that poverty is also violence against people. You know, when you don't have enough to eat, that's violence against your population. And the other thing that I think that we have to do is to put names. The same way how we put names to the president of Venezuela, for example. When I go to panels and discussions, usually people know the name of the president of Venezuela, but very rarely they know the name of the president of Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador.
Why don't you share?
I think that we should not put the name and the faces of these corrupt regimes, because they are regimes that are killing our own people, and they are not given the alternative. You know, you can die in Honduras, or you can live, and you know the alternative. And I think that in the case of Honduras, the U.S. supported an illegal re-election 2 years ago in Honduras. Let's talk about that, right? Juan Orlando Hernandez is an illegal president because our constitution in Honduras does not allow re-election. However, he was re-elected with the support of the United States. And it was a lot of political repression after the re-election. Many people died, young people that were protesting on the streets. And today, this year is going to be the 10th anniversary of what? A coup d'etat, a military coup d'etat that took place in Honduras 10 years ago, almost a decade. And then we ask why people come from Honduras, right? And once again, the US government supported that coup d'etat in my country. A military coup d'etat that was supported by the Obama and Hillary Clinton administration. So don't tell me now that we're facing a crisis just because Trump is in power. We have been facing a crisis for more than a decade in Central America. That's why people are coming from Central America, because you are there with your corporations and supporting these regimes that are killing our people.
Thank you, Patricia.
I'm sorry, but
No, don't ever apologize. Don't ever apologize. It's wonderful for me to be able to listen and take it all in and not have to figure out how I'm going to cut that down to 20 seconds for a story. So I think this is a really valuable opportunity, and I thank you for that. It's important. It's important context. One of the things that I am sort of thinking about right now is in traveling to the region is hearing stories of people who have been forced to flee, and they always begin explaining their stories to me by saying, I didn't want to leave. Nobody wants to leave their home. No one wants to make this decision. But it's, you know, it's thrust upon them. Rebecca, I'm wondering if you can think of what you would have needed to stay in El Salvador. What support you would have needed to stay in El Salvador and make a life there.
¿Qué te hubiera tomado a ti para que te quedaras en El Salvador? ¿Qué factores o qué recursos te habrían hecho quedarte en tu país?
Uno, un mejor salario, porque allá el sueldo es muy poco lo que se gana. Pues la tranquilidad con las pandillas que atacan, tal vez uno se gana $1 y ya se lo están robando en la esquina cuando uno viene de su trabajo. Y luego tantas muertes que ya con el miedo uno no quiere salir. Entonces, si todo eso hubiera cambiado en mi país, yo creo que nunca hubiera llegado a Estados Unidos.
First, a better salary. Second, the calm or the peace that would have made me stay. You earn $1 and then that same dollar is being claimed by the gangs. So it's never enough. Also, you cannot even leave your house. You're always scared that they're gonna kill you with so many debts. So if that would have changed in my country, I wouldn't have been here.
Patricia, give us kind of what is this is a selfish question for me. What are we missing? I think I have an idea of what your answer is going to be, but what are we missing in our coverage? Because my job is to help you all understand this better, right? And so I'm wondering, we've talked a little bit about the disconnect between the reality on the ground, the historical context, and sort of chasing the headline. So what do we need to be doing better as journalists?
Well, that's a hard question, but
It is.
because
Why
I am
don't we
here
keep it short?
at WR.
No, but
It's
it's important. I mean, it's how the message is.
It's definitely very important,
Right.
and I think it's not just about you; it's about the media in general. We are definitely listening, hearing a very superficial analysis. Actually, I don't want to call analysis, and I'm not talking about specifically about WR. I want to be respectful. In general, a very superficial story about what migrants are coming to the U.S. Right? It's about storytelling, and storytelling is very important. Rebecca can share her story, but sharing stories without providing a context and deep analysis about what is going on in our countries, it means nothing. Because the U.S., and I'm not going to generalize, but a lot of people in the U.S., as you can see, are saying, "Oh, all these illegals." You know how people are reacting, about migrants that are coming to the U.S. And I think it's important to educate the public about what the U.S. have been doing in our countries, and historically, let's talk about that. We, go to universities with Rebecca. We try to have that conversation. Let's talk about the free trade agreements during the 90s. Let's talk about the gangs that were, exported from LA to El Salvador, not the opposite. People think that, the gangs are coming from El Salvador. Excuse me, but the gangs were created in LA and they were exported to countries like Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador during the 90s when the U.S. where the government were deporting a lot of people to our countries that were not ready to receive people that were already involved in gangs in LA. And here we are, and of course, it's not just about the U.S. Foreign policy. It's also about our own governments. We also, as Central Americans, we also need to hold accountable our own governments because they are regimes that are very corrupt, and the level of corruption and impunity is endemic. Endemic. Yes. And you hear very few information in the news about, for example, the brother of the Honduran president is right now in New York because he's facing charges because he's a narco. For the past 10 years, he has been active in narco activity. Nobody's saying anything about that in the news. Very few information about that. Google, very few information, right? It's because he's not somebody from South America, maybe. But let's talk about what is going on, right? Two ex-presidents of El Salvador are right now in jail. One of them is in jail. The other one is in Nicaragua, right? Right? And this is not about ideology. This is not about ideology because one of them is from the Arena political party, and the other one from the FMLN. So, but corruption is endemic. Let's talk about that and put the names of these regimes, these presidents that are like killing our people.
Fatima, the same question to you from your perspective.
So I would love to hear more stories about people who are staying behind and fighting for change. Because, you know, when we go down there and when we work with our country partners, they're just incredible, incredible women and men who don't leave, who do stay behind under some of the harshest conditions in the world to survive. In Guatemala last year alone, 20 environmental and human rights defenders were actively targeted and killed, right? So think about if you were a human rights defender or an environmental defender here in the United States. You'd be all over social media, you'd be doing campaigns, you'd be out in public spaces, fighting for what you think is important, as you should. You probably would not think about your personal safety every single day and being killed when you got up in that morning or your children being targeted, right? That is not the environment that people face when they choose to stay behind and choose to fight for change. And they're there. They exist, and they're incredible. Many of them, we're so lucky, are our partners at Oxfam. I want to give one specific example. There's so many. But when we talk about what women face in particular, right? Women have some of the highest rates of violence in Central America than anywhere in the world. Anywhere in the world. The highest rates of violence against women are in Central America, right? That's gang-based, but it's also family-based violence. And it's through cultures of patriarchy. It's through cultures where it can be from family members, uncles, priests, and other trusted family members. And you see that playing out. We have programs like the Shaira Ali Center in El Salvador, where we are bringing together over 600 men, women, and youth to redefine what gender norms can look like in El Salvador, where women and men, where boys and girls start out thinking and feeling and believing that they're equal, right? And this is one of the drawings that they did at the Shaira Ali Center to show you what strength and equality between men and women can look like when the tree and the root is strong versus when it's weak and you're oppressed and are persecuted every single day just for being female, right? And so there are incredible programs like the Shaira Ali Center, but so many others. There's incredible leaders. We work with Juana Hernandez in El Salvador, who is a 61-year-old woman living in very rural areas in El Salvador as a community leader, fighting just so her community has the right to water, which is under attack in El Salvador. And if you can believe, in places like in El Salvador, the government is actively debating in its legislative assembly whether or not to privatize water so that it can be sold to the highest bidder. When we talk about poverty, it's about human rights, right? And we work with people like Juana Hernandez, who have nothing in terms of financial resources and everything in terms of the will and courage to fight back against man-made oppression. And that's what you're seeing playing out. So I would love to see more stories about what is working and how we scale that up and how we support those who are working. And to take people who are nameless and put names on them so that we can actively support them and make sure that they feel more protected than they are.
I love what Fatima is saying. I think it's extremely important because, you know, Berta Cáceres was famous. But as in the case of Honduras, for example, I have in my notes that Global Witness, that is an international human rights organization, published a report recently that in Honduras, more than 120 activists, environmental activists, all of them peasant campesinos, were killed in Honduras since 2010 to 2017 because they were defending water, you know, and they were against all these corporations that are going. And again, listen, this is not about ideology. This is about real facts. This is about something that is happening. And here, we don't hear about that usually. So thank you for...
Rebecca, we've talked a little bit about resiliency. That's the sort of theme that brought us together tonight. I hope you see your own resiliency. But I want to ask you to think about maybe moments where you've felt that you had to be strong, or where you've felt that other women have lifted you up along your journey. I know you've been compelled to work with Centro Presente, and I wonder if you can talk a little bit about why you chose to work with Centro Presente as well.
Bueno, hemos visto que la resistencia es uno de los tópicos de la plática que tenemos hoy, y queríamos ver si tú pudieras compartir con nosotros tu propia resistencia también. Y quiero preguntarte si tú pudieras pensar en aquellos momentos en los que tú te tuviste que sentir muy fuerte, y también, aparte de eso, si nos pudieras hablar un poco del trabajo que estás haciendo con Centro Presente.
Pues no tenía opción, ser fuerte o dejarme caer, sobrevivir o morir. Esa fue mi motivación, mis dos pequeñas que tenía. Y por todo el camino, tal vez no soy cristiana ni católica, pero siempre yo confío en que Dios me traía protegiéndome por esas dos niñas, no por mí, tal vez no por mí, pero por mis dos niñas. Entonces, gracias a Dios llegué a Centro Presente en el 2015 y pues me hice miembro. Me ayudaron mucho con el proceso que tenían mis hijas en un centro de detención, y desde entonces ahora todos los eventos yo quiero sentirme involucrada, y si puedo ayudar a alguien con mis problemas, que le sirvan de ejemplo a alguien o que lo motiven a seguir adelante, yo lo hago.
Gracias.
De nada.
I didn't have any option. It was that or let myself to fall down. It was living or surviving. And my motivation were my two daughters. I'm not Christian, I'm not Catholic, but I did trust in God. Not because of me, but because of my two daughters. In 2015, thank God, I became a member of Centro Presente, and they have been helping me a lot. And they have been helping my two daughters too in this center. And I wanted to feel involved in this story, and I wanted to share my example and my story to other people, and that's exactly what I'm doing.
Thank you. I think we're going to open it up to questions now. I see a few coming through on this fancy Slido apparatus. So we'll start with some of these. And I'm going to open this up to everyone on the stage, okay? So Anna, if you're able to maybe help translate some of the questions, that would be great, so Rebecca can get involved. So one of these questions down here says, when I vote for the next president of the U.S., what policies should I be asking her to support or end to help alleviate the crisis beyond our borders?
Cuando yo vote por mi siguiente presidente, ¿cuáles serían las políticas que yo te pudiera preguntar para que se pudieran mejorar las situaciones y aliviar un poco este problema?
O presidenta.
Oh, sí, o presidenta también, qué
Sí.
buen punto. That's a good point.
Who wants to take that first, Fatima?
So I'll start. You know, I think first of all, thank you. It's a great question, and there's 4 or 5 things I would look for specifically when it comes to Central America in terms of U.S. policy. The first thing is we need economic and political strategies from the U.S. government that really put women and girls at the heart of our strategy and approach. And not just in terms of a development perspective, but also from a political perspective. And so putting women and girls at the heart first of what we do would be a really critical shift for how we think about U.S. policy in the region. We need economic strategies in the region that really target the needs of citizens of these countries, and so not just the top echelon, but really looking at economic strategies that empower women, girls, farmers, migrants, and those who very much are living under the poverty line in these countries. The third thing I would say is we need strategies that really target rule of law and corruption in these countries, and understand that sometimes our very partners from the US governments are those that are the ones very much driving corruption and impunity. And so what does it mean to not just work from what we say like a G to G strategy, a government to government, but really looking at strengthening partnerships between with civil society as well, because those are the very actors that know how to come up with the types of programming that would really help support a broader rule of law and anti-corruption effort. And then the next thing I would say is looking at doubling down on our right to protect and protecting on asylum. We have to uphold the rule of law in our own country as well on this, and that means providing and giving asylum to those who seek it at our borders, consistent with our obligations, in human rights and under international law. That is under attack.
That's not happening
every single
right now.
day right now.
It's not happening.
Right?
Yeah.
And so going back to the basics, even on what our own obligations are under international law and human rights, and protecting asylum is really key as well. So those are a few things I would say that are concrete steps that I would look for in terms of administration policy.
Great. Patricia, I know you have
Yeah, I have some. Number one, it's same thing, I think, to establish programs that are going to reduce structural poverty. Also, programs that are going to help, Central American countries to reduce the systemic corruption and impunity that is taking place. And also reduce the aid that is going just to militarize our societies. We don't need more militarization in our countries. People need food, better salaries, go to school. And the last thing is the U.S. has immediately, this is a dream, but I think that they should remove military bases from Central America. We don't need military bases in Central America.
Rebecca, did you want to add anything?
No, I think that the two girls is good. I think the same.
Okay, all right. Another question, which is one that I actually hear a lot in my reporting as well, is are Central Americans migrating to other Latin American countries? Why make the trek all the way up to the southern border with the U.S.? Patricia, do you have a thought on that, or?
They are, definitely. For decades, they have been going,
Where
we
they
have a
going?
lot of Salvadoreños and Nicaraguenses going to Costa Rica, for example, right? And the people that are going from Costa Rica from Nicaragua to Costa Rica are being discriminated in Costa Rica, right? And unfortunately, governments in the region, I think the systemic operation against migrants is global. It's global. And the U.S. have been imposing these policies at the global level, in our opinion, raids, detentions, deportations, because corporations are making a lot of money putting people in detention centers. It's not because, bad people and we have this system. No, because they are making billions incarcerating brown people and also migrants. And I think that they are globalizing the same strategies. And they are, of course, they are going, a lot of people from Honduras are going to El Salvador and vice versa, seeking for, protection. And many of them, of course, are coming to the U.S. because they have a lot of families, but they also think that in the U.S. are going to find I don't want to say better opportunities. I hate when people say that. I'm sorry, I don't like using the word hate. It's because, as we have been saying, people are not coming because the American dream or because better opportunities. No, they are fleeing. They are not migrating. Right. But of course, they are going to other countries.
One of the things I remember hearing in El Salvador was, where am I going to go internally? El Salvador is smaller than Honduras. It's the size of Massachusetts. So it's like, where are you going to relocate me from the gangs that are knocking on my door every day asking for money, and threatening?
Can I just add, just for context for the audience? I mean, we're living in a time of unprecedented mass migration in the history of the world and globally, right? So today, as we sit here, 250 million people are on the move, right? Now, some are doing that for economic choices, for reasons, but about 68.5 million are doing that because they're forced to flee. They're fleeing from conflict, they're fleeing for safety, they're fleeing because of wars, right? So you have about 70 million people, which is one of the highest rates that we've ever seen, fleeing because they feel like they have to flee to survive.
Thank you for putting it into
Right.
that important.
And so they're fleeing everywhere, wherever they can go to survive, right? And certainly a country like the United States that shares a large southern border and is seen as a place that historically has been a place where people can go, not just from Central America, but all around the world.
Right, and there are those roots. There are communities here.
And we have, I think one of, Patricia, right, the largest Salvadoran community is right here in the United States. So there's a lot of ties and a lot of roots. But just to say that, this is a historical rate that we're seeing at a global level. And the driver here is when people are forced to have to flee, are we going to turn them away? And that's an open question in our government policies right now.
Rebecca, this question is for you, and it's a wonderful one. Rebecca, how do you teach strength to your daughters? And what is your vision for the next generation of strong Central American women?
Ooh, good question.
¿Cómo le enseñas a tus hijas a ser fuertes y cuál es tu visión en el futuro para que ellas aún sean más fuertes junto con otras mujeres?
El apoyo entre nosotras mismas. El siempre estar unidas y el miedo dejarlo a un lado. Porque si ella tiene miedo a expresarse lo que siente, ella nunca va a soltarse y ser ella misma. Entonces, pienso de que el unirnos, eso es todo. Y pues, el ser fuertes, pues, yo creo que ya lo traen, la mamá es así.
First of all, the support among us to be united at all times and to leave the fear behind, to not have fear to express who you are and be yourself. And they are strong because it's in their blood because of me.
They don't have a choice.
They don't have a
This is an important one. There are so many great questions coming in. I'm so happy that this is working and that you all are so engaged. I just want to make a note now. We have about 15 minutes or so left, but I think people will probably be hanging out a little bit. So if we don't get to every question, hopefully we can gather afterwards. Okay, so for all of you, how can we get involved in Boston? And what do each of your organizations need to push immigrant issues forward? So I'll give that to Fatima or Patricia, whoever wants to.
So just to say, we are always actively looking for supporters, for volunteers. There's many ways, and if you visit us at oxfamamerica.org, we have a great website with lots of action steps that you can take to join us, contacting members of Congress, contacting your local representatives, helping us raise awareness of these issues. I mean, that's half the battle sometimes, is just people not really understanding the complexities of structural issues affecting poverty. And in Central America, it's very complex, as we've talked about here today. So please do visit our website at oxfamamerica.org. As Shannon said in the beginning, we're headquartered right here in Boston. So we're literally down the street by North Station. Come visit us, reach out to us. There's many ways. We work a lot with colleges, with universities, with high schools. Hunger banquets, for instance, and people just raising awareness of the kind of poverty that so many communities here are facing. And then the other thing I would just say is that we're really proud because the way our model works is we work with and through local partners all around the world, including in Central America. And so if you're out in the region, if you're traveling, working with Oxfam, but also through our local partners as well, we want to make sure that those are the voices and faces that also get the support that they need, and happy to help be a convener to that as well.
Great. Patricia?
Yeah, I actually saw a lot of people, I wear glasses, but that have been helping Centro Presente volunteers that are here. We don't have a beautiful website, but you can follow Centro Presente on Facebook. There are many things that we have to do at the local and state level. Massachusetts is not a progressive state when we talk about immigration, unfortunately. For the past, I think I sound like a broken record there. When you call me, I say the same thing. We have been trying to change public policy at the state level in Massachusetts, and not just Centro Presente, many other organizations. Nothing is changing, right? No success.
What things have you been trying to change, like tangible policies? Give us a couple.
Like, for example, in the past was the Trust Act, now they call it Safe Communities, right? Licenses for undocumented people. I see the youth have been doing a lot of work. I'm not going to take credit for the work that organizations like the SIM, the Student Immigrant Movement, and many others have been doing for years, trying to pass the in-state tuition, for example. Why are we not able to do it if we are in Massachusetts, right? And this is before our governor. This is when Duval Patrick was in power, when the entire House was in the hands of the Democratic Party. And I think that the leadership of the Democratic Party is a problem, the structure, because they don't have the political will to do anything in support of the immigrant community. And I think that we need to change that. Robert Dalillo had to go to Central America and understand why there are a lot of Salvadoreños coming to East Boston, right? And people from Honduras. And we had to change that. And we had to change their strategies too. I think that organizations that are at the State House sometimes not necessarily are representing the voices of all undocumented immigrants in Massachusetts. We need to change that too. And it's our responsibility to do it. You can volunteer, you can be a donor because we need money. We have been organizing delegations to go to Central America, and we need the money to put together these delegations because we need to educate policymakers, we need to educate our volunteers, we need to educate the general public about what is going on there.
Okay. Thank you. Rebecca, there's another question for you. How can communities help welcome immigrants, people who have maybe journeyed the way you have to get here? How can we, as communities, be more supportive?
¿Cómo podemos ayudar a las comunidades de inmigrantes que toman el mismo viaje? Nosotros mismos como comunidad, ¿cómo podríamos ayudarlos de la mejor manera?
Recomendándoles, pues yo recomendaría a las comunidades que a mí me ayudaron, que conmigo ha estado Centro Presente, cualquier cosa, ellos siempre me han apoyado. Y pues Alianza Américas también estuvo con nosotros. Ahora pues estoy con Oxfam. Y pues por mí, quien me dice, oye, estas personas tienen problemas, yo, bueno, busca estas personas pueden ayudarte, que se lo harán mejor que yo.
I will recommend them to go to the same communities that I went to, asking for help. I will recommend Centro Presente, Oxfam, because they helped me a lot. And if somebody tells me that someone is in need of help, I will look any type of help to get in contact with this person.
This is a specific question in terms of a way to support immigrants and migrants. What do you think would be important for mental health professionals working with the migrant community to know?
It's for all of us?
All of you, whoever
Oh my God,
wants to
that's
answer.
a really important
It is
question.
an important
Listen,
question.
we as Centro Presente, we don't have the capacity to deal with trauma. And I think that we can do better at Centro to, make connections with universities and people that are working with that. We are trying to empower, as you see, Rebecca, but it's not just Centro. I think Rebecca has her own power, as you can see, right? We just giving the space. I'm not going to take credit, but we are opening the space for them, right? And we're trying to empower them, educate them about their rights, and be active. But and of course, legal advice and advocacy, all the work that we do, but that's a real need because people come with a lot of trauma. And we, at least at Centro Presente, we're not necessarily working. Last night, I received a phone call. I'm not lying. I received a WhatsApp at 4 a.m. in the morning from Evelyn, who is a member of Centro Presente. I think you covered this story. She has 11 years old. She had 3 kids, but the 11 years old was in a detention center. We were helping her with the case. But now the kid is actually the attorney who is helping. I don't want to put her on the spot. She was here earlier. I don't know if she's here. Sarah Mayon, I'm sorry, but she was helping us in a pro bono basis with this case. Thank you, Sarah and Matthew. But Evelyn's tía, ¿cómo se dice? Sorry. Aunt, I'm sorry, I speak broken English, as you can see. Is
I'm broken at all.
she was. Can I say this in Spanish? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Thank you. Su tía fue raptada. No, la hija de su tía, su prima, fue raptada por las pandillas en El Salvador.
Her aunt, actually the daughter of the aunt, she was kidnapped by the gangs in El Salvador.
Ella está desaparecida y no se sabe qué ha pasado con esta chica. Y su tía tiene como 7 niños en la casa y las pandillas han dicho que van a regresar a matar a esta mujer. Esta madre no sabe si su hija está muerta en este momento.
Her daughter went missing and she doesn't know anything about where she is. And her aunt has 7 kids, and the gangs have threatened her, saying that they're coming back for them, and she doesn't know what to do.
So, and I just sharing this information with you because she's receiving a lot, like all this trauma and anxiety, and I receiving, a message at 4 a.m. in the morning, and I received the anxiety, right? And the staff of Centro Presente, we don't receive training to deal with this, and I think it's important to start doing these partnerships. And I also want to acknowledge the presence of Daniela Carvajal, who is here, our immigrant rights organizer, who had DACA, and she has been helping other immigrants at Centro Presente, supporting them. No helping, I don't like the word help. She's supporting them, right? And we also have Luz Elena, who is an immigrant who has been working with Centro Presente for many years, who had TPS. She answered the phone, and she is always there for people. And we also have Patricia Carvajal, who is an immigrant from Honduras. Oh my gosh, she's very strong. And she has been very active with Centro Presente too. She has TPS. And all the resiliency and the energy that they have is amazing. But we need to do better with the trauma. Yeah.
Fatima, is there anything that Oxfam has thought about working on in this level at all, or is it?
Well, I just wanted to, the word trauma, I just wanted to pause on that for a moment, because I think sometimes when you're reading this in a newspaper or on the radio, we don't understand the journeys emotionally that people have been on, not just in this moment, in this year, but generationally in these countries. And I have to say, one of my hardest moments, I travel all around the world looking at our programs and our work. One of my hardest moments was actually back in October when I was in Tegucigalpa at a women's shelter. There's only 4 in the whole country that are relatively safe, thanks to people who fund their survival. And I was at one of the Oxfam shelters, and we were talking to a woman, very young, 30-some years old. She had recently fled to the shelter and had gone through a lot of counseling and support. She was telling us the story of her daughter, who's 7 years old, who she fled because her husband had been beating her repeatedly and didn't think anything of it. That was very normal for how she grew up and her marriage. When her daughter turned 6, he started beating the daughter. And that was her tipping point to say, I'm going to try to leave. And her first few attempts were not successful, and finally she was able to flee with her daughter. And fast forwarding months later of going through some counseling, the daughter was asked what she wanted to do, a 7-year-old. And I was thinking about this because I, at that point, had a 7-year-old, and I was thinking, her biggest choice for my 7-year-old is what cereal to eat in the morning. Is it Cheerios or, Quaker Oats, whatever, picking your choice. That's the choice I give her. The choice that Valeria gave her 7-year-old was, did she want to stay in the shelter and be safe, but she couldn't go to school? Or did she want to go back and live with her father? She would probably get beaten again, but he was the only one, because he controls the purse strings financially, who could afford for her to pay to back to school. And the decision was given to the 7-year-old to make that choice. She chose to go back to school. She said, I want to learn, I want to go back to school. And she went back home and went back to school. And I'm just saying that story because when we think about this question and when we think about trauma, we think about policies and we think about all the important work that many of us do all around the world and in this region, we sometimes forget the humanity of what it is we're doing and why we're doing it. And it's not just physical survival, it's emotional survival. And these stories of what it takes, Rebecca's story and so many others, to survive and to thrive and to live a life that's worth living with dignity and how we do that. And I think for all of us living here in Boston, where we intentionally or unintentionally, we're surrounded by so many stories like this, what it takes for us to step out of our own day-to-day comfort zone to help understand what people have come through and do. Just taking that step is a really big step forward for all of us as a collective community, because so much of that is just basic trauma.
I mean, I think all of you being here tonight is a good step.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm grateful for your time. We have just a couple more minutes. Does anyone want to share any parting sort of calls to action? Or we've talked a little bit about, policies here in Massachusetts at the national level. Are there any other? Patricia's got one. Let's start with Patricia.
I have. We can do too many things, right? But I want to recommend all of you, please read this book by one of our writers and journalist, Oscar Martinez from El Salvador. He documented the migrant routes, the journey of Central Americans for almost a decade in Mexico, because Mexico's our story, right? Mexico have been oppressing migrants because the U.S. have been designing programs like Plan Frontera Sur to detain and deport and incarcerate and immigrants from Central America before Trump. Please read this book. And I just want to let you know that the first chapter of the book is about Rebecca's brothers, who were actually in Mexico when Oscar was documented. And this is like a coincidence that I read the book after. But and the other thing is, oh my God, I forgot. I'm getting old. I forgot the other thing. But
We can come back to you if it pops in. Okay. Fatima, do you have any other sort of takeaways that you would like everyone to leave with?
Well, I just have to say, I'm so inspired to kind of celebrate International Women's Day with all of you here today who took the time to come out and instead of just reading a newspaper story or a short, 2-minute segment on the radio, came out to really have a conversation about what's happening in the region, why it's so complex, why it's so hard, and why we're a part of it, and why we have a responsibility to figure out how we can collectively do better. And I just want to say, I've celebrated many International Women's Day, but this is really special. It's really special that we can have this conversation and both understand how complex and hard it is, but to also understand the strength and resiliency behind it. And that there are incredible women like Rebecca, like the work so many at Centro Presente are doing, and throughout the Boston region and so many other places. And just to say, I'm really personally touched to spend it all with all of you and to have this conversation. And Shannon, thanks for helping us actually go behind what is happening to actually have that discussion, because it's at the root of everything we talk about. And as Patricia said, we don't often talk about it enough. So I'm really appreciative. Thank you.
It's literally our pleasure, but I want to give Rebecca the last word. What should we take away from this evening?
¿Qué crees que el público se pueda llevar con ellos mismos esta noche?
Pues podría decirte tantas cosas. Bueno,
Sí.
pues yo pienso de que tal vez la historia que yo les he contado ya la han escuchado muchas veces, pero yo sé que cada día un poquito queda en la mente o en el corazón de cada persona, y que tal vez ese poquito haga un cambio, porque eso es lo que necesitamos, cambios. Y pues gracias por invitarme y por escucharme.
Sí, gracias a usted.
Well, I could tell you so many things. I think that the story that I tell or that I say, you have been listening to it several times. But every day when you hear this story, something remains in your hearts, in your minds. So please Keep it in mind so we start making changes because we need changes. And thank you so much for listening to me, and thank you so much for letting me share my stories.
Thank you. So I think that is I can't construct a better way to end our conversation tonight. I want to thank everyone for being here. I want to thank Oxfam America. I want to thank Centro Presente, all of our panelists. Thank you for being here at WBUR's City Space. I hope to see you guys often and frequently, and hopefully we can have some more conversations of this nature. We will be sort of congregating out in the hallway for a little bit, so if you have some urgent questions you wanted to address with some of the ladies, feel free to find us out there. There's also a table with some information from Oxfam out there. And just thank you for being here. Tell your friends about this event space. Tell your friends about what you learned here tonight. And thank you. So thank you to you guys. Ahora sí.
So far, only 240 migrants